into voice acting. That's why you're here. Okay. Cool. All right. Does anybody here have no idea who I am? All right. Thanks for lying. So I'm Joe. I've been a voice actor for, I started in 2013. But I also am the founder and CEO of LearnVoiceActing.com. And like my job and mission has been to sort of simplify the very mercurial industry of voice acting and empower the next generation of actors to take control of their career wherever they are and however much experience they have, and stop asking for permission to do it from an industry that sort of operates like it's 1970. So that's kind of been how I've started out at LearnVoiceActing.com. So today I'm going to kind of walk you through the industry that you may or may not know. One of the biggest questions I get asked is like, how do you do this thing? Like, how do you break in? And I find that there's so many like myths and misconceptions about how voice acting as an industry works, like your prerequisites, like do you need a demo? Do you need an agent? How do you find your own work? There's a lot of myths about how to do it, and I kind of wanted to give my perspective. So I'm going to leave it as much time as I can for questions at the end, because everybody kind of has their own spin on what they want to find out. Can everybody hear me in the back? I feel fairly confident in my use of my own voice. Okay, great. If at any point I start to mutter, please call my wife. So I'll kind of take you through like a little bit of a presentation, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end. But again, my goal here is to just kind of guide you through what the whole industry looks like. So we'll talk about like what is actually voice acting, because it's probably more than you think it is. How I got into it, what the old world looked like, which is basically that old world model is where lots of the myths come from. It's where people get those preconceptions that kind of prevent them from getting started, kind of like put them into a vapor lock of confidence and imposter syndrome. How it changed, we'll talk about the new world. We'll talk about what I call being a talent entrepreneur, which is a phrase I developed less than 3 days ago. So I'm going with it. So what is voice acting? Like, everybody thinks about voice acting and they think of the tip of this iceberg here, right? Which is the most visible and sexy, if you want to call it, voice acting. It's cartoons, it's animation, it's anime, it's games. But the reality of it is, every time you hear a voice in the wild, wherever that is, whether it's please stand clear of the closing doors in the subway station, or a phone tree, or something pops up on the internet and it's someone explaining, I don't know, how they make t-shirts at a particular company. There's a solid chance someone got paid for that. So why not me? Is essentially the question that I ended up asking many, many years ago. The reality is there's so much more out there. And I'll be very honest with you, this would be a very business-oriented discussion. These pay way less than these. Everybody thinks these pay way more. They do not. They do not. There's a reason anime actors still have day jobs. It's because anime is the worst paying voice acting work you can do in the industry, period. There's nothing that pays worse. And that's what I'm saying, like there's so many misconceptions, so everybody's face go like, ah! When I said that. But it's all sort of about the same thing. When I teach acting, all of these things still require a very similar skill set, which is finding the impulse behind saying what you're saying, telling a story. There is as full of a story in a 30-second commercial about coffee as there is in a 30-minute episode about, I don't know, a dude with 9 arms with a 40-word anime title, right? It's all about communicating, storytelling, and servicing a client's message with your voice, whether that client is Bandai or Subaru. So how the hell did I get into this? Because it's weird. My favorite thing to tell, and it happens like at every workshop that I've ever been to where there's a bunch of other voice actors. Everyone goes around and is like, okay, tell me how you got started. My favorite joke is, I got into this just like everybody else. I was a military intelligence officer for the United States Air Force for 10 years. I got out and worked for the CIA and FBI one day, stumbled into voice acting, 1 year later quit my job and moved to LA. That's literally a true story. That's how this happened. The real nitty-gritty, I guess, origin story is I was on reserve duty. I had left active duty, and I was on reserve duty one Saturday morning and was chatting with a friend of mine that I was in a writing group with. And I was like, oh man, I've always wanted to try voice acting. I think it'd be kind of cool. And he was like, well, my company used to hire people from this website for our like marketing videos. And I had a $67 microphone that I had won in a competition on Overclocked Remix, which if you haven't heard of Overclocked Remix and you like video game music, I don't even know what you're doing here. But I digress. And I booked the first job I ever auditioned for, which again, like most voice actors, was a cartoon panda speaking Arabic to children. And like this is you probably can't see it quite clear in the back, but like my first studio here is literally just a desk with a cat on it for acoustic treatment. Some stuff on the walls, a carpet, and a microphone hanging in the middle of nowhere, right? I did not start, like, there's no theater degree. Did I mention a theater degree? Did I mention like improv training? Did I mention like some crazy word like Stanislavski or method acting or whatever? No, there's nothing there, right? And then basically from a very stark business perspective, I went, at some point I'm going to begin out-earning my day job. I hate working 18 hours a day because I will work 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9. How do I make this stable for myself? And so I built a safety net and then decided, okay, I'm done with government work. This is way less stress than being involved in life and death decisions. So I decided to do that. And then I moved to LA to hunt very, very specific work. I'll get into there in a minute. The point of my rant here is that like my story is not typical. There really aren't that many typical stories. As a matter of fact, people with really like solid acting backgrounds have a really tough time in VO for a lot of different reasons that I guess I really don't have time to talk about here, but the idea of being alone in a booth without anybody to work with is really, really hamstringing for a lot of actors that are used to being on the stage and playing off an audience and playing off each other. Now you're alone in a booth and they're like, oh my gosh, I guess I have to sound like this, and they never book anything, right? So it can be really difficult to have that, I call it theater baggage. If you have theater baggage coming into VO, it can actually be a little difficult. I kind of came into this like an accident. But there's a lot of reason why people think that you have to get to VO in a certain way. And when I say VO, we use voiceover and voice acting sort of interchangeably. The way it kind of used to work was that you had to be in LA and New York because the gatekeepers were there. The people that serviced the jobs, the people that knew the clients, were agents, right? They're the people walking around in the 3-piece suit who are like literally listening to people at coffee shops, listening for somebody to have a voice, and they go, "Kid, I'm gonna make you a star." Right? That's really the way it worked. And then so you have a bunch of actors who are in a very, very small community, like extremely small. What you would do is you would literally walk into your agent's office in the morning. We're talking like, in an era of fax machines, or before fax machines, when someone would run to their agent and give them a script and say, Leo Burnett, which is a commercial agency, needs a spot here for Toyota. You would wait in that office, you would go in there, you'd be competing with like 6 other people at max. You'd read a spot. If you booked it, you made like $100,000 on the spot, and then you went home. You worked like 3 times a year, and it was like, it's just a different game. But you had to be in New York and LA to do it. The only way to really get that education was you had to either sign on with like a coach, like a private coach. That could be kind of cost prohibitive. It still is in some ways, like coaches, who I love. I'm not knocking coaches, but you'll hear me knock coaches a lot. They're expensive, and it's also difficult to learn a whole industry like that. But you didn't have to learn a whole industry back in when I say old world, pretty much up until the year 2000. You didn't have to learn a whole industry. You just had to be competent behind the microphone. That's it. You really didn't need to know anything else, but you did need to know people. You needed to know agents. You needed to be in the place where those gatekeepers were, which is why people think you still need to go and live in LA to do this. There was a lot of like the idea of paying your dues and waiting tables and waiting for your big break. Those stories did exist, right? But then, and it was very exclusive because you had to be very geographically locked to do it. Then we had the internet happen. And the whole industry slowly began to change. Online marketplaces emerged where instead of having to run your script to an agent in LA, you could post it online. And instead of having to talk to an agent, voice actors could directly audition for your thing. So you could cut out.
I know I'll never be the same. Shook my world so hard again. Wish I washed away my sins. He's a dead man walking, blank stare in his eyes. Should have given up on the ones I trust. Never should have been surprised when they shot him down. Cold blood to the ground.